Hey, it's Alan. I get asked all the time, how exactly does Kadima help people? There are three primary ways. One, we provide one-on-one personalized career coaching with a focus on getting you a great job. Two, we provide an online do-it-yourself course where you can work at your own pace. Three, if you have a job offer, we'll help you negotiate for more. So to find out about these great services and everything else that we offer at Kadima, sign up for our newsletter. Go to sickpodcast.com. That's SYCK podcast.com. I promise you, it'll be the best newsletter to accelerate your career. Thanks a lot.
Live from Brooklyn, welcome to the Sick Podcast, starring Alan Stein, where he steers your career with Kadima. Along with Alan, I'm Russ Reba, and more evidence that networking leads to amazing connections and relationships. We wouldn't have this episode today if Alan did not have a slice of pizza at an event with our guest. But before Alan gets into it with LaToya, let's look into the personal side of your world. Any new happenings in the Stein household, or on the roadways, or on the waterways, because they're all getting their licenses and what have you.
Yeah, so as we're approaching the end of September here, as this episode releases, my kids are 1 month into school. They're actually kind of listening to me and getting to school on time, so a little less yelling now that we're a month into the school year. And yeah, so just getting into the flow, back into the fall. I just came back from the National Black MBA Conference in Atlanta, which was awesome. And yeah, it's just good to be back in Brooklyn after my summer in Connecticut.
Oh, back home with the immediate family is always good. So let's rock this interview with LaToya Jordan on the Sick Podcast.
I am super excited to have LaToya Jordan here on Steer Your Career by Kadima podcast, the Sick Podcast that gives you real actionable advice about career decisions and career perspective. And LaToya, I was fortunate enough to meet at an in-person event, a rare in-person event, maybe one of like 5 in-person events I went to in 2021, where we both met. We both use the same company, great company, Vava Virtual, for our outsourced virtual assistant, virtual exec assistant. And the founder there, Lauren Gall, brought us there to thank us. So we met there over pizza, and I had to jump out before the pizza ended, before the pizza got there. But this is just like the power of network. We didn't know each other, and we have a lot of things in common, and it's been great getting to know you. So without further ado, I'd love you to introduce yourself to the Sick crowd here, the Sick career crowd.
I love it. Hey, Sick crowd community. I'm LaToya Jordan.
We're calling the Sickies. The Sickies.
Oh, even better. Hey, Sickies. I love that. So I'm LaToya Jordan. I'm the founder and chief consultant for my company, Lead by Design Lab, where we focus on leadership development and organizational development for small businesses as well as entrepreneurs. So that's us.
Nice. We'll get into some of your career choices, but let's go back a couple of decades, and you're about the same age as me, I'm assuming, based on when you graduated college. You graduated in 96 from James Madison.
Yeah.
I graduated in 95 from Binghamton.
Okay.
Talk to me about how you wound up at James Madison.
You know what? It's a funny story. I am born and raised in New York. And when my mom started talking to me in high school about where did I think I wanted to go to college, I said that I wanted to go to a college in Virginia, a particular college, Virginia State University, because my aunt went there. And so that's like the college that I knew and wanted to be where my aunt went, you know? And so my mom looked around and looked into it and was like, well, that will require in-state tuition, and we live in New York. And so I was like, okay, I don't know what that means for sure. So she took the bold move to quit her job and to move us in the middle of my 10th grade year to Virginia to develop residency so that we could get in-state tuition when I went to Virginia State. Spoiler alert, I didn't go to Virginia State. When I applied to schools, we ended up not choosing that one. And my mom was like, I don't care where you go, but you're going in Virginia. So don't even put any out-of-state school on your list, lady. And I was like, but Spelman, but Howard. She was like, unless they move a campus to Virginia, you're not going. Yeah. So that's how I ended up at James Madison. It was my top choice for schools there.
Nice. And when you graduated James Madison, where'd you go after, and how did you decide, like, how did you wind up in that first role?
Yeah.
And interestingly, like, I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile. Your LinkedIn profile skips from 96 at James Madison to 2005 at Fisher Rock Consulting. So there's some mystery occurring in the decade in between.
I wanted to study student affairs. I wanted to be in college forever, right? Short version. And so I wanted an experience and get an advanced degree that would allow me to stay in the college ecosystem. So that's where I went after James Madison, and then actually landed a role from there at Marquette University. So I was an academic advisor for Marquette. And probably it's not on my LinkedIn because it was my time working in university life, right? Mm-hmm. So I was an academic advisor. I traveled with our athletic teams across the country as they competed in NCAA Division I basketball. I focused mostly on the women's team when I traveled. So I did that, and it was so fun, and it helped me to reinforce my love of developing people. And I think when I think of the common thread of my whole career journey, whether it was in university life or in corporate or now in my own practice, it's about developing people. And so that love started when I was working at universities at Marquette, and then left there to get my PhD in organizational psychology. So I came back to New York and went to Columbia and studied organizational psychology there. And then got a fellowship. So here's where it gets like fun, right? So for your audience, said yes at a time when I was given a choice, right? So what for me happened was I was working at Columbia and going to school at Columbia. And my PhD program had a rule at that time that you couldn't work full time when you were in the PhD program. And I was like, well, how am I going to eat? I'm here living in New York. I'm living off loans. What do you mean I can't work full time? And it was like, you kind of have to choose, we'll figure out how to help, but you can't be all in your academic studies if you're working 40 hours or more. And they were so right. I was bombing in school trying to keep up with everything. But so I said, you're right. Yes, I will quit my job, and I'm just going to take this trust fall with you all. And the trust fall landed with them helping me to get a fellowship at Pfizer. And so I was a doctoral fellow at Pfizer here in New York, and was able to have that role for about 2 years until it transitioned into a full-time role, working there in their employee development area. So it's one of those things of like, I could have dug my heels and made a stink about, no, it's not fair. But I was like, you know what? You're actually right. I'm not doing well. I'm not balancing it well. So let me just go ride this wave with you. I'm going to quit. You'll help me figure out what's next, and we'll do this together because I trust you all. Yeah. And it worked out wonderfully because I ended up at the Pfizer headquarters in the city, and my career took off from there.
So was there a particular person at Columbia that helped put you in contact with this Pfizer fellowship, or how did you get introduced to that?
Yeah, you know what? I think what was happening was, when you're in doctoral programs, you do a lot of research, right? As a part of your dissertation. And so they had established relationships with Pfizer to get their employee data. And so the head of the talent team at that time was a contact for our Teachers College doctoral program because he helped to give us data when folks needed it. And so I think at the same time, he was also looking for ways to bring in kind of thought leaders or folks that were being steeped in the literature into Pfizer to help inform things. And so the mashup worked out well. I'm not sure who spoke to whom, but my advisor told me about it. But as I pulled back the layers after I met him and got into the program, I realized what he was looking for was a lot of research. He wanted me to really help to ground some of the practices they were doing with, founded research. And so that's kind of how I started working there. Nice.
And you were at Pfizer for about 5.5 years or so?
Yeah. So the first 2 years as a fellow. And then when I finished my coursework, I was more comfortable seeking out a full-time role because that was where it was really heavy to do both. And so I applied and transitioned into a full-time role as an individual contributor, moved into a manager role, and then moved on after that.
Your last role at Pfizer, or your most significant role at Pfizer, what was it and what was your responsibility?
I was responsible for the global mentoring program at Pfizer. And the
global mentoring program?
Yep, the global mentoring program. And so I created the program from scratch and then scaled it across multiple countries. And so that was a huge program. It was very much about making sure that folks that may not normally have access to mentorship could get access, whether or not they were from other countries and didn't know how to kind of reach into headquarters to be mentored by those in headquarters and things like that. I was creating a platform. And this is definitely pre all the things that make it so easy now to network and, pre LinkedIn, pre all of this, right? So I'm creating like a dating matching system with some of our IT folks to match people and create profiles and all of that. And it was very successful, well respected, and actually led to other types of programs that were even more strategic, like sponsorship programs for women and people of color and things like that. But this was kind of that baby step to saying, like, you're right, everyone doesn't get access to different people. We need to have a program to be more intentional and offer these services more intentionally. And then that mushroomed into other things. So that was the main aspect of the job that I had. And then I branched off to other kind of career development things for the company, but that was like my baby that I started.
Very cool. I've been part of lots of mentor programs, partly as a mentee and some earlier in my career, but more often as a mentor. I've always wondered, is there more supply of people that are looking for a mentor, like at least in your program, or like where was more supply? Were there more people willing to mentor or more people that needed help? And if there was a dichotomy there, how did you try to work around that?
Yeah, I would say at that time in Pfizer's history, there was definitely more people looking to be mentored. I didn't do any research to figure out the why. Now, having led other mentoring programs, having been more senior at other places, I'm clear that a huge part of the why is that if you are a leader or someone who can mentor, there has to, like, what's in it for you to take time away from your work and what you're being expected to deliver and being rewarded on to do this yes and thing, to do this other thing kind of at the side of your desk, right? And so if companies don't prioritize that and allow you to take something off your plate, call it 10%, whatever you want to say, then it's hard for someone to say yes to biweekly meetings or review this presentation before you do it, or because it's additional work on a plate that's already overburdened. Right. Yeah. So I didn't know that at the time when I was leading it at Pfizer, but certainly as I've moved through my career and have led talent functions, I know that that's why people typically will say, not right now, this is my busy season, right? I'm not able to say yes to you, or let's check in and maybe have a monthly lunch, or, people want to like just do a little bit because they care and they want to. But they
do it out of obligation, almost.
They do it out of obligation, and they also may have a passion for it, but now it's going to burden them to do it. And that's a hard decision to have to make. And as companies, we need to kind of make it a lot easier to say yes to that.
Yeah, and I've seen that. I've seen where people are almost pushed into it. It's like, oh, everybody's doing this, sign up for the mentorship, and people don't really want to mentor. It's not everybody is. Everyone
shouldn't be a mentor, quite frankly.
So if there is a surplus of people that want mentorship and not enough supply of mentors, I've always personally myself been proactive of identifying people and asking for mentorship rather than going through these programs myself, because I also saw that when I was in the program where, because you're also at a pyramid, like the people that are mentors at top, there's very few of them versus all the noobs that there's a ton of. And there's also more demand for education and less a supply of time up top of the pyramid. So I personally never, like some of the companies I worked at, they had some of these mentorship programs, and I never found them to be good at setting me up with like a right mentor. It was almost like you can choose some, but you don't have tons of choices. So I just was proactive about reaching out to mentors myself. I'm curious for yourself, thinking about mentors or sponsors that you've had in your career. How did you get them? Did you get them through formal mentor programs like this, or did you, or I'm assuming you've had some mentors in your career. Sure. How did you identify and get those mentors, influence those mentors to give you LaToya at the time?
Yep. It was always organic, as you say, Alan, right? Like reaching out to them directly. It might be someone I might have heard speak at a town hall, or it might be someone who's doing something I'm passionate about as well, and reach out. And I would reach out and ask them for 15 minutes. Like I never would say like, hey, can we meet for an hour? Like, hey, do you have 15 minutes for a quick coffee break? And just get on their calendar, introduce myself. And then typically the two mentors that I'm thinking of right now, they were very receptive and wanted to, share with me. I think sometimes not having it in the confines of a program takes some of the weight off of it for the mentor, because now it's not like you have to meet with them twice a month and da-da-da. It's like you all be as fluid as you need to be and create the boundaries that you need. So I think that helped me to find the mentors that I've had, is certainly keeping my eye out and taking that bold move to introduce myself and create a relationship. That said, what I will say about formal programs is everyone doesn't feel as confident or as comfortable in the beginning, particularly early in their career, to do that, right? Yeah. And so having a program where you can learn how to network, how to maybe interact with a more senior person, and there are some boundaries around it that make you feel safe, right? Like, oh, they are going to respond to me because they kind of have to, versus it's kind of like going to a bar and meeting someone and hoping they call versus being on an online app, right? And doing it that way. So I do think there's value in the formal mentoring program, at least to help people kind of have their training wheels on a little bit if they need that.
Yeah.
But it, to me, never should replace organic networking and relationships that form that will last longer than that doggone program would have anyway.
Yep. And do you have any advice for people that want to get these mentorships organically? So people, I think it's great advice. And if your organization has these mentorship programs, definitely sign up. Mm-hmm. You can have multiple mentors. It's not like you need one mentor. Like I've had a number of mentors. Yeah. So take advantage of these programs, but then there's an opportunity also for people to be proactive here. And if people want to be proactive of identifying a mentor, how should someone think about the type of mentor that they want, and how should they approach that sort of mentor?
Yeah. So first of all, I love what you said about having more than one, right? I used to call it like your either your board of directors or your cabinet, right? Like you want to have different people that can give you advice in different areas, right? So someone you may get mentored for might be in your discipline. Someone might be in an area that you know nothing about and want to learn about, right? So it really is important to have diversity in all the ways that you can have diversity on your cabinet, if you will. So I'm glad you called that out, Alan. Advice for doing it organically: look around your environment, and who is doing something that you want to learn more about, or is doing something that you want to be doing in the future. Don't always try to just go to the top of the house. I can't tell you how many times, like I'd be talking to the CEO's EA, and they're like, yeah, like everyone is trying to get on his calendar. That's not realistic, y'all. But who maybe look at his career or her career and see like, well, how did they get to be CEO? Oh, they started in finance. oh, wow. So maybe there's some interesting roles in finance. Maybe I can be mentored there, right? And learn about why is finance so important to become a CEO, right? So I would say like do some, if it was me now, right? If I was like a younger self right now, what I would say to myself is do some research on where you want to go and what typically is the path to get there. What are the typical experiences to get there? And then look for folks that are in those experiences now that you can learn from. And that's who you would start with in building a mentoring cabinet.
So that is some sick advice. So do the research, look at the people there and look at their path, and then follow them, reach out, and introduce yourself on top of any formal mentor programs that your organization offers.
Yeah,
cool.
For sure.
So after Pfizer, you went to JetBlue.
Yeah.
Very, very different industries.
Very different industries.
Pharma, transportation, airline transportation. Like I look at your LinkedIn profile and it's pretty clear to me, but tell me how you made that switch and what your mindset was of how you're going to go from pharma to airplanes.
Yeah. So I got to tell you, that was probably one of my riskiest moves. It was something that I was people were like, are you crazy? For many reasons. One, if you are quote unquote a title chaser, the title was lower, right? I was leaving a manager role to the title being something that was, there wasn't even a comparable title at Pfizer. It was a facilitator role. I think it was called like leadership facilitator or something like that. So people didn't even know how to like match it up from a band perspective. So they're like, are you being demoted? Like what's happening for you? And you're going from pharma to travel, which some would argue is, has a different cachet, if you will, to it. For me, I loved the brand. I'm from New York. I remember JetBlue as it was growing. I was just enamored with that brand and I wanted inside of it. I wanted to understand the insides. I wanted to help to build it to be even more than what it was. I just wanted in on that stuff. I had drunk the blue Kool-Aid long before I started on my first day. So for me, that mattered. Like it was a company that I cared about, that I wanted to be successful. And there was also a very clear conversation that I had with the recruiter about what my career trajectory would be, that I was coming in more senior into a role that was fairly junior. I was taking a step down to come up, right? And then I was doing that somewhat strategically because I was like, well, how else would I learn this company but from this bird's eye view? I'm going to get to facilitate the senior leaders and their leadership experience and their journey. Yes, please, because I'm going to get to know them, right? I'm going to get to understand the way this thing is working. I didn't know anything about the airline industry. What better way for me to learn it, right? And so for me, it was a very strategic move and it paid off. Within 11 months, I was promoted to manager and had a team. Like it just, boop, boop, and then within 2 years, I was a director. So I was like, it was absolutely risky financially. It was a different set of numbers when I first started. And so I had to streamline quite a few things going from Pfizer to JetBlue when I first started. But for me, it was about being very thoughtful of what I wanted, where I wanted to go. And I knew I could get there. I knew I had all what it took. And it was going to be a whole lot harder to get there at a mammoth like a Pfizer than it would be at a company like JetBlue, who needed some of the skills and experiences and knowledge that I had. So it worked out perfectly. I became the director for talent management, and then later added diversity, creating the diversity strategy for the company. And then was there, I think 7 years was at the company. So it was a wonderful experience. It was exactly what I thought it would be. And I saw my work, like I saw the things that I did at the larger level versus honestly, sometimes when I was at Pfizer, it was like dropping a drop in the ocean. You're like, did anybody even see if it rippled? Like, what happened here? Whereas if I did anything at JetBlue, it would be like, whoa, And so that for me felt good and felt like I was making an impact.
So you had a larger impact there. You didn't know that necessarily going in. You like the brand better.
I love the brand. Yeah.
The title was lower, and the comp was lower. The compensation was lower. So was it just the brand, or were there other things that were in your decision-making process? Because were you doing okay at Pfizer at that time? Were you being pushed? Okay, so you weren't being pushed out. So you did this by choice. No. Did you reach out to JetBlue, or did they reach out to you?
I applied. I reached out to them.
Okay.
So it was two things. It was the brand and it was the promise or career trajectory. Mm-hmm. Those were the two things that I saw as an opportunity there that I wasn't going to have at the same pace at Pfizer.
Okay.
I think I probably would have had the financial gains at Pfizer at a different speed than at JetBlue, just because of, different industries. But I saw my career trajectory being just catapulting at JetBlue, largely because of what I'm speaking to people that work there, speaking to the recruiter. She was very clear with me, as we were going back and forth on the offer. And I'm like, what? Now, did you say, what? Can you say that again? Like, what? And she was like, listen, you got to understand, this is where I see you. I'm telling you, you will be a rock star here. And And I was like, okay, I can see that. I can see what you're connecting and where I can fit into different parts of the talent function in a way that was exciting to me. And so I was like, you know what? I can bet on this. If for no other reason, it'd be really cool to do it for a few years and try it. What is the worst that could happen? I was leaving Pfizer on great terms. It wasn't like I couldn't go back there even if I wanted to. I had a whole bunch of options. So I was kind of sure, let's do it. And like I said, within 11 months, I was promoted. So it worked out well.
Nice. And you were there for 8 years. I think you said 7 years. LinkedIn says 8 years.
I remember. So 8 years, was that right?
Yeah. LinkedIn says 8 years in a month. Yeah. So they're pretty good with their math there.
Yeah, right.
And you left as director of talent management and diversity. Mm-hmm. Was that for the whole entire organization or parts of JetBlue?
For the entire organization.
So that's a big ass job. And they have lots of employees. Does that include the people on the planes as well?
Yeah. So
how the hell does one person, how many employees did JetBlue have when you left approximately?
About 25,000, something like that.
So talent management on its own, I've worked with talent management teams. I've worked for software companies which have lots of bloated resources. So there's 12 different heads of talent and there's 4 different heads of diversity, but you're one person doing both. So how do you do that? And what were your goals on the talent management and what were your goals on the diversity?
Yeah, so we had our team ran hot all the time, right? So we were responsible for performance management. We were responsible for all of the succession planning for the C-suite and all those fun things. We were responsible for our, what we call emerging talent program, which was anyone who was hired as an intern or any type of temporary, not contractors, emerging talent level. We created a graduate rotational program, so we're responsible for that as well. We were responsible for partnering with our employee relations team on any challenging issues.
And for folks that don't know, employee relations is usually the legal team within the company that have to fire people or prevent the company from getting sued or retaliation or racism.
Any conflicts across, there might have been a discrimination question.
They're lawyers, though. They're essentially lawyers, mostly.
Yeah, they can be, but within there is also a function within the HR that they're not lawyers, but they partner closely with the legal team on that. So you're right. So we did all of that fun stuff. So that team was about 12 people. So still really small, again, for the whole company. And then on the diversity side, ground up. So the employee resource groups, the programming, the heritage months, any type of thing that we're trying to do in support of the community. We would partner with our CSR team. So it was quite a bit of things looking at internal mobility and movement of diverse talent? And are we being intentional about inclusivity and things like that? Lots of reports that have to go out relative to that. That team was like 4 people, including an intern. So JetBlue traditionally runs very lean. And that certainly was represented on our team. I think our goal was from a DEI side was to make sure that we were constantly showing the value of inclusivity versus internally and externally. Like, what is the value of flying in all these different amazing places? What is the value of bringing diverse or inclusive experiences to folks that may have never been certain places, or being able to go home? What is home for in an inclusive way, right? Because a great example would be there was a time when people, our frontline crew members would really complain because certain flights would be filled with luggage, right? Think of like certain countries where you live here in New York and you're going home and you're taking so much home, taking so much to Haiti, so much to the DR, because you have so much to give, right, to your family there. So we would do programs to help people understand, like, what is that? Like, don't complain about, I got to put all of this. But it's like, no, you are serving at such an important role right now so that their family can feel the love that they're trying to get. So no, don't say no to the bag. Figure out how to get that bag over there, because that bag is love, right? So on the DEI side, we just try to constantly infuse that internally, externally, in our marketing and everything. And then also, how are we showing up inclusively across leadership levels, right? So that was the role there, and we did a lot of good stuff there. I was really proud of. And man, on the talent management side, it was about, are we keeping people engaged? Are we keeping the right people in the right seats on the bus as we moved? And if not, how are we helping them to get in the right seat? Where is the gap? How do we support that and help them to feel engaged again at work, or help them to identify what is going to engage them and help them to find an opportunity wherever it needs to be? So we did that through a lot of processy stuff, but that was always like our North Star, like, right seats, right bus. This is it, right? Like, does that process help us to get there? Cool. That's the right process. Like, that was kind of our mantra that we kind of touted at our meetings and stuff.
And I don't know if you're using that analogy, this people getting the right people in the seats in the bus, from Jim Collins. I don't know if you took it from him, or Good to Great, or that's just an analogy you've used before.
I mean, it's not like it's unique to him. Once upon a time, like, subconsciously is in my head, but no, we listen, Alan, if you don't think we use a lot of transportation analogies and airline, child, everything is about a wheel, a bus, an engine, like everything. So kind of that's where I kind of used it from, but I'm sure subconsciously I heard it from Good to Great, which we read, which I remember when I was at Pfizer, us talking about it. And then all of a sudden, all the Good to Great companies, like X many years later, we're no longer there, right? We're no longer great. And so that became such an interesting conversation about, what gets you there won't get you, what got you here won't get you there, kind of thing. And we did a lot of good conversation about that in future, like book clubs, so it was interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah. So you're, for people that can't see you on the screen here, you're a Black woman, and you're put in charge of diversity at a large global company, 20,000 people. You need to ensure that people are espousing and practicing the DEI values of JetBlue. What benefits did you have being a Black woman, being able to see what maybe that experience is? And then what challenges were there of you being in charge of this organization and coming in from your perspective? What helped you in that role? And then what hindered you in being able to implement some of that in your role?
So I think what helped me in the role is, one, I think, there is, just from the container that I'm in, there is a level of like credibility that perhaps I bring, right? It's like, oh, well, you'll get it. because of the container. I think that was a help, but also was a hindrance, because I always try to say is like, I am an N of one. We are not monolithic. So I don't want you to think that my experience as a Black woman from, Brooklyn, New York, that's been blessed and privileged in many ways, is the experience of that Black woman that's working the desk at JFK, right? You're gonna need to talk to her too. So I think sometimes it would work until I called it out, right, and said, hey, don't do that, right? I'm not all of it, right? But what I will say was beneficial for me was that it also gave me access to speak to our crew members in a way that was authentic, and they knew it was coming from a good place, right? It was coming from like, I'm really about trying to help. Like, what are we doing? Let's get it. It wasn't like they're just saying it because it's the hottest thing on the block right now, and they're just trying to, get this title or whatever. People knew my heart was in this, and it was a passion for me. So I think that was a huge opportunity and ability that I was able to bring to the table. I also think, Alan, that it was everything else I bring, right? It was all of the experience and the academic stuff that I bring that added the validity to it, right? Like, okay, I'm a Black woman, and what? But no, I'm going to tell you about the research that shows X, or I'm going to ask you to do a field study, or I'm going to ask you to really bring us the data to prove X point, or why we're doing this program, or why we need to increase the number of directors of different ethnicities, because it's going to do Y. So I think that is what it was. It was the marriage of both. The container would give me kind of face validity, if you will, but then I would back it up with like the other stuff. And they were like, oh, we need to really listen to her. That I think made it a little more magical. The hard part, though, was, I'll be honest with you, it's also really personal, right? So if I'm in a room where you're talking about something we don't need to keep putting so much budget into that. That's also about me. That's also about people that look like me. That's also about my younger self, that you're now saying that program doesn't matter. Let's move that money to whatever. Ouch. So that was hard, being a person that has a passion. And it could be whatever it is for anyone, right? Like, you could be all about sustainability, and then you lead sustainability and they're cutting it. And you're like, ouch. That's what it was for me, right? Having to constantly be the advocate for something that also is about who I am personally, that can wear on you certain days. And I think you can talk to any DEI practitioner, particularly those of color, that starts to hurt when you have to go up and stand up about another police shooting, and you have to be the voice of that, right? While you're also scared to death that it's not your nephew or husband or son next time, right? So it starts to get hard on your soul when things aren't progressing, and you're having to you have to write that same email that the CEO is going to send out month after month after month. It kind of gets hard, Alan. So yeah, that's the hard part.
I'm sure. And so you were in a role of influence, essentially, because was there any accountability for leaders around DEI metrics? And what metrics were they accountable for around diversity, equity, or inclusion that impacted their compensation?
Yeah, so we did. That was the beauty of the way that my role was designed. When they first asked me to take on DEI, I wouldn't take it on without the talent management side, because I was like, it won't have any teeth. And so owning performance management allowed me to put things in place exactly the way you're speaking of.
Okay, so you were responsible also for the performance management process, the ratings, and how people are evaluated?
All of it.
Okay, so you were able to infuse the DEI accountability into there, which often is separate. And I see it's a nice thing if you have it, but if not, whatever. Most people are not doing it anyway.
Yeah, we called it the culture goal. And so the culture goal included all aspects that we would say were important to maintaining the JetBlue culture. And a part of that, a large percentage The largest of the percentages was around DEI. Now, the thing was, this is at the start. I'm hoping that it has evolved since I've left, but at the start, for me, it was around, I need you all as executives to show up to things. I need you all to be present. I need you all saying yes to things. I need you all to show with action certain things. And so some of the things they were being responsible for, I remember the number of like, LaToya, you're killing us. Like, show up to the culture events. Be a sponsor for an ERG. You get points for that.
So people actually got points.
Yeah. So the way it worked was a culture goal is you had to get X many points, and then there were bands.
As a leader or everybody in the company?
We started as for leadership. So when we first started the culture goal, it was just for our senior leaders, so director and above. By probably the 5th year, they were asking for it at the manager level. And then they wanted it down all the way to the individual contributor level. I just told you it's 20-something thousand people. So I was like, oh, hold your horses. Let's just get each band right. So when I left, they were building it out for the manager level. But for director and above, it was X many points. And you just had like, let's say 70 points or like 80 points and better, you got this percentage that, you met your goal by exceed. This to this, you just met it. And then lower, you didn't meet it at all. And it was a really big deal. Like it almost took a life of its own. It became too much of a big deal because then everyone was driving people crazy to get the points because it became that. Now, the behavior was good because on the employee side, our individual, it was like, wow, did you see who came to the event? So on that side, it was doing what it needed to. But on the other side, first of all, it became a process nightmare, trying to get all these executives to change their schedules because they had to go to this event because they needed the point. Like, now I'm like, oh, y'all are missing the point. The point is like, I want y'all to be there because it is about, so we had to end up like resetting things, and we gave them a lot more like flexibility of like, you decide, like you write your culture goal. Like the last year I was there, what we decided to do was you write your culture goal. What are you committing to do for the culture? Recognizing that these are the important tenets. And it included, all the things that we talked about already. And then you commit to what is good, what does great look like? What is good? Like you write it. That changed some of the tenor of it because it was just becoming too much of them stressing out. Yeah. It's a tail wagging the dog, exactly is what I called it at a certain point. But the intention was great. I actually presented that approach at some of the professional organizations and my academic organization, because people were trying to figure out what you're saying. Like, how do you get that movement? How do you get them to do it? You have to tie it to their own performance and their pay. And that's what we did very well. But then we needed to tweak because it got to be, like you said, the tail wagging the dog a little too much.
Yeah. So you're responsible for performance management across 20,000 people. And there's different people in that organization. There's directors like you, there's pilots, there office staff, other things like that. How can you give me a little overview of how performance was managed there? And usually companies have ratings, and usually 3 to 5 ratings. So every X period of time, you get a rating. Was that similar at JetBlue?
Yep. They would get the rating though. Once they would get a mid-year kind of
informal.
But then the year end is really where they got their rating. And for JetBlue, things changed as we got certain groups became unionized. So there were some things that certain things got pulled off of the, off of the table. But for non-union, salaried, from day one, they've always had ratings, mid-year check-in and year-end. And those reviews looked like what we measured on was what we call the what and the how. So what you did were your goals that you set with your leader. Some people, to your point, if they work, let's say at a station, let's say they worked at JFK, they might have gotten their what by the station's goals. So we want to have X% on-time departures. We want to have, blah, 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 NPS rating, Like, so they might have those all given to them as their what. The how was always the competencies. So, how are you getting there? Because when I first got there, the biggest complaint people would have would be like, the superstars are killing it. They are performing they are driving it all, but they are jerks. It sucks to work with them. No one wants to be on their teams. Like, they are mean, and that's not JetBlue. Like, that's not the culture. So they were like, fix it. Like, how do you fix it? So I came in and I created, it took about a year to create really grounded competencies that spoke to how do we want people to perform and behave. And then that became kind of the credo. Well, that's great that you exceeded on that goal and got it 3 months early, but you did it by stepping over everyone. So the math of that will give you a lower rating. And that's just what it is. And so people started to pay attention to now their how, because they realized that the what mattered, but the how mattered just as much. And so that helped quite a bit.
Across JetBlue, like half were unionized and half not about, or?
By the time I left, more than half. Because our front line, so the folks that work at the airport, they're our largest number of people. It's over probably 15,000, right? So, and then our pilots were unionized first, and then our in-flight became unionized. So those three were unionized by the time I left.
So you had about 5,000 employees that were getting this performance management rating?
Yeah. Yes. But what's interesting, 2 years before I left, even the unionized groups, the frontline in-flight and airport crew members, they still wanted to create a performance process. So it was really interesting because they were like, we see the value in it. We want to do it here. We recognize that we're under, a new world order, but we kind of want some version of that. So we started to try to figure out how we can make that work, but it would have to then get approved by the union and all that. So when we were working on, particularly we're in flight, building out what a performance process would look like. And what was interesting, Alan, is think about that group. Their manager never really sees them perform because they're in air. So we were like, who will evaluate them? So we were, and there was a huge thing about do not do secret shopper. No, like that would just be horrible for our culture if the crew didn't know that someone was evaluating them. So we were really playing with and doing a lot of kind of iterations of what could an evaluation in air look like for this group of people. It was actually a really fun project to like play with and try to figure out. I don't know where they landed with it, but that was a really fun project.
Nice. And Pfizer also had some performance management process as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they did. Very similar. It was a 9-box, very traditional process as well. Mm-hmm.
The 9-box, for people that are not familiar, it's a 3x3 grid that shows performance and potential, and you put people in one of 9 boxes, and you want to be in the top right, you don't want to be in the bottom
That's right.
left, and most people fall in the middle box.
Yeah, exactly. And some companies will have a forced distribution. Yeah, they'll say you have to have X many in this, there are good reasons to do that. You don't want to say that everyone is awesome or everyone sucks, but so some companies do require that. The one thing I will say is it's okay to be in the lower box if you're brand new or if you're new to your role, like if you move within the organization, that's the time that you will likely be in the lower box. So if you end up in it, just check in and say, okay, oh yeah, I just started 2 months ago. I'm supposed to be in the lower box, because you probably should be.
So being someone with so much knowledge about performance management at these big organizations, and I can tell you also from my experience from the big organizations I worked at, all these have performance management processes. All of them have a curve, whether they talk about that transparently or not. It's not like everybody can be outstanding.
Definitely not.
So for people that are not in the room, for people that are getting rated, which are most people, what advice would you have for my listeners of how they can influence that? So the number one way to influence it is by your work and your performance. But there is not, in my opinion, and you can disagree with me, there is not a clear line of meritocracy. People say it's a meritocracy. It's really hard to determine if something's a meritocracy, and there's lots of influence there. So what can people do to influence their rating?
I would say the best advice I would give, and I've given to a lot of folks that I mentor, is make sure that your direct boss is not the only person who knows your work, right? You want to make sure, and this is not a brown nose moment. This is how can you either be visible in your work, showing other people? It could even be lateral, like your direct boss's colleague. That's like, oh gosh, I saw Alan's presentation. That was great. He offered to present at my team meeting. It was really great stuff. You want other people besides your direct boss to be able to speak about your performance in that room that Alan's is referring to. Because when it's just kind of like you kind of want to have as many voices to perhaps either amplify what your boss is saying, if it's all good, or to provide a different perspective to what your boss is saying. And so I always tell people that offer to present something somewhere, offer to be on other people's projects if you have the bandwidth, obviously not to take away from the time and work that you should be doing on your work. But you want to do that. You want to be on, if you're interested in like an ERG, be on that. You just want people to be able to speak of you in that room besides your direct boss. I think that's the key advice I'd give you.
Yeah. And that's some sick advice right there. And I can tell you that's true. I've heard people in rooms in calibration. I've been through 34 or 36 in my time. I'm sure you've been through a lot more.
A lot more.
But
that's like one season for me, Alan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it could be amazing. Like if I was managing you and I said, oh, LaToya did a good job on this, and I think she should be meets expectation or exceeds expectation. And someone else chimes in of, hey, LaToya did this awesome job on this, and she's always so helpful and collaborative. That just like whatever my rating was, now all of a sudden it's in the consideration for the next level up because there's multiple voices in the room talking on your behalf.
Yep. Yeah. It's an exponential change. It really, really is.
And on the flip side, you have one person say something negative about you. And I've seen that happen. And it's happened to me. And I only found out because I had friends in the room that they're like, hey, Alan, you got to nip this in the bud because so-and-so is saying bad shit about you. And I wound up doing a big kiss ass campaign with that person. And I wound up neutralizing that person. And actually they wound up being a positive, but only because I knew what was going on there.
Yeah. And I think that's what, let me just say this. It's important to know that anyone can speak of you, good or bad. So whether or not it's the EA that's helping to schedule something or whatever, anyone can speak of you and either help or hinder your career. So don't just be nice to the senior leaders thinking that that's going to get you somewhere. No, because then that EA could tell her boss or his boss, man, I just had a horrible experience with Alan. He keeps being so rude to me. That's coming into the calibration rooms, friends.
Yep.
So you kind of have to see everyone as people you need to respect and work well with when you're at work. Period.
Yeah. And LaToya, we're running low on time. We didn't even get to go into like your lead by design lab.
Okay.
But before we leave here, lots of listeners here that are looking to accelerate their career. They're not getting paid what they deserve. They're not accelerating and moving in the trajectory that they would like to. What advice do you have? It could be books, it could be words of wisdom, it could be things that mentors said to you. But what words of advice do you have for people that want to increase the acceleration of their career?
Two things. One, say yes. Say yes to opportunities. Even if it doesn't on its face feel like, oh gosh, that project, I don't really want to do that project. You don't know where that project could take you. And you don't know the exposure can give you, back to our previous comment, that can be a voice in the room. So if you're at work and they want to put you on a project, say yes to it. It could really be a game changer. The other thing is get experience. Get experience, even if it's outside of your company. Volunteer to do things. If you're an accountant, volunteer at your, civic organization to do accounting or to do something else to build your experience. Because oftentimes you're not getting to the next level role or you're not getting the money you want because they're looking at your experience. And so increasing your experience, it doesn't have to be from this particular company, it's experience, right? And so I would say try to beat down doorways, go to entrepreneurs and say, hey, I got extra 10 hours a week. How can I help you? Or, hey, nonprofit, how can I help you? Get experience, build that experience on your resume so that you can garner the level and the dollars that you want. That's
great advice. Yeah. Last thing, how can people either get in touch with you, follow you? You have huge words of wisdom. And again, we didn't even talk about your business at Lead by Design Lab or your work at Teachers College. But if people want to get in touch with you, if people want to follow you, what's the best way that they can find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, right? LaToya Jordan at LinkedIn, or Lead by Design Lab on LinkedIn. I'm also on Insta because you can't not be. So Lead by Design Lab on Insta and Facebook as well. But yeah, feel free to reach out. Everything you heard me talk about today is Lead by Design Lab. So you heard about it already. If you want to learn more or be coached by me, just reach out and we can have a chat.
Well, it was so great to hear how you steered your career and the decisions that you made and the successes that you had, and you're continuing to learn and grow and also share your experience with others. So thank you for what you do, LaToya.
Oh gosh, thanks Alan for having me. It was fun.
Well, we can all learn a thing or two from LaToya Jordan, definitely. We are grateful for her spending time with Alan on the show today. That wraps up another amazing episode of the Sick Podcast with Alan Stein. Be sure to check out past episodes and other resources on the website at sickpodcast.com. That's SYCK. Alan, any particular destination on the site that you'd like to direct our listeners to?
There's so much good stuff there all across the website. I'd love your feedback on what you guys want to see on there. You know, it's something that is underlooked, underappreciated is our YouTube channel. So check out our YouTube channel. I have dissected a real live Google offer on that sheet. We put real interview footage on there. So check out our YouTube channel, Kadima Careers, on YouTube.
All right, you can get to all that at sickpodcast.com. For your host, Alan Stein, I'm Russ Reba, and we hope you've enjoyed the LaToya Jordan episode. You're going to love the next one.